Our headliner tonight really exploded into the women's health space, and we're very glad she has. Dr. Mary Claire Haver is a board-certified OB-GYN specialist, a Menopause Society certified practitioner, #1 New York Times bestselling author. She started the Mary Claire Wellness Clinic in 2021, dedicated to caring for menopausal patients. She is also so much fun. Mary Claire has been dubbed the Queen of Menopause. I don't know how I'd feel about that, by the way. And she has a social media following of about 3 million people across her channels. I think she's kind of like your no-nonsense girlfriend you can talk to about anything. So please welcome Dr. Mary Claire Haver. Hi, Mary Claire.
Hi.
Look at this turnout. Isn't this great?
Hi, everyone.
Oh, my God. So we have so much to get through. So you have become such an essential resource.
Wait, I thought we were talking about wine.
Oh, we are. We'll get to that. We'll get to that when we're done with our first glass.
Yeah.
But you have become such a resource for so many women who I think felt not listened to by their doctors or kind of ignored by the medical establishment. And I'm just curious how it feels taking on that role. I guess it's really gratifying in so many ways, isn't it?
It is. Getting stopped at every airport bathroom, when I'm trying to wash my hands. Some brave soul comes up and tries to tell me how, just in words of gratitude and appreciation. But
do they tell you about like their problems?
no. They just want to say thank you and somehow that I touched their life. And
do they ever knock on the stall? They used to do
Not
that
yet.
with me. Knock on the stall and say, "Can I have my picture with you?" And I'd be like, "Really? You haven't had that yet?"
You were on TV. I'm sitting in my bed in my pajamas, talking to my phone. So I think they just feel like I'm just the girl next door, and really they're just giving me words of gratitude.
But and so they're grateful for you, but I imagine you're really grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you're filling such a need.
I didn't know, I kind of grew with my audience, right? I knew that there was a problem, but then as I kept sharing on social media, when 10,000 women DM you about their frozen shoulder, you're like, let me look into this, maybe, or there's tinnitus or there are palpitations. I'm like, all these women can't be lying, There's probably something going on here. Let me dig and see what I find.
Well, one of the things we wanted to talk to you about, Mary Claire, is your backstory, because I love to hear people's origin stories, like where they came from, what forces shaped them. And you grew up in a big Catholic family in Lafayette, Louisiana. You were the middle of 8 kids, and your parents ran a Cajun restaurant.
Yeah, we just called it food. It wasn't, Cajun was just happened to be where we lived. And so it was a nicer upper scale Cajun restaurant.
But tell us a little bit about your childhood and what it was like. It
was
sounds like it was really fun in many ways,
it was
right?
a lot of us. So I had 4 older brothers born 5 years apart. And then my parents took a break. And then they had me and my dad, this was before ultrasound. So they had no idea they had 4 little boys. And then finally they had a girl. So I was the star. And my dad kissed the doctor and everything. Then my sister was born 3.5 years later, so she and I were kind of a pair. Then my oldest brother, he was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 5. And so that was part of the break before they got pregnant again. When he went into remission, they decided to keep going with their family. And when I was about 6, he came out of remission and fought the cancer for the next 2 years and died when I was about 9.
Which was, losing...
And my mom was pregnant for number 7.
Oh, gosh. So that must have been so...
At 41.
That, so dealing with your brother and also getting ready to have another baby, but also at 9, that's such a tender age. Recently, I've interviewed so many people who have lost a parent at a young age. Mariska Hargitay just did a movie about her mom, Jane Mansfield, and Mariska was 3 when she lost her mom. And then I interviewed Ellen Pompeo, who also lost her mom when she was 4. And I think these losses, and of course, my daughters lost their dad when they were 2 and 6. And these early losses are really hard. But also sometimes I think when you're a little bit older, it's even harder. It must have been really traumatic for you to lose your brother. And he was 19?
He was 19.
So he had been fighting leukemia for a long time.
What I remember was like trips to the hospital and is he in remission? And, you know, I just remember those conversations and like I was coloring, and when he was getting chemo, you know, in the side room of the doctor's office, my parents would like just walk in the back door for his chemotherapy at the doctor's office. So it really, that was a huge part of my childhood growing up. And I remember driving to Galveston. So we grew up in Lafayette. We used to vacation in Galveston. And Jep had chemo that morning, and he got tired. And so he pulled over at one of those overpasses. If you're on I-10, anybody from Louisiana or Texas in here? And my sister and I played on we were sliding down the underneath of the overpass when my brother like slept in the car when he was so tired from chemotherapy. And then he woke up, we got back in the car, and he drove us to Galveston.
But watching that as a little girl, did that encourage you to become a doctor? Because, you know, my sister Emily died of pancreatic cancer when she was 54, and now her son is a gastrointestinal oncologist. He really focuses on colon cancer more than pancreatic, but I think seeing what she went through and watching sort of the medical system, I mean, they did as much as they could, but that's such a very difficult cancer. He really wanted to help people. And I'm curious if your brother's death inspired you.
It was a little later in life. So my undergraduate degree is actually in geology. And
why? Actually, that's
the guys
terrible.
were cute.
The guys were cute.
I needed an extra science, and the guys were cute there, and it didn't seem that hard. So I took the class and kind of fell in love with the science accidentally. And then it was the oil bust in the 80s, and so they had all this scholarship money because no one wanted to major in geology. And I was like, that sounds cool. I'll do that. And I actually loved it as a science. Went to work for 2 years for an oil company. Met my husband at the coffee bar, who's an engineer, and then this coffee's really hot. I think I want to go to medical school, and he didn't know he'd have to pay for it.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you went to so you had 8 years, right?
Yeah, so I started med school at 26, so I was a little bit older.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know at the time is they were looking for non-traditional students, you know, at the time, and they liked, you know, females were doing well in medical school. They wanted people with life experience, so I just took the Idiot's Guide to Getting into Med School book and filled it out and to go take this test, go over here, turn in these papers. And then they're like, congratulations, you're going to medical school. And I was like, cool.
Was it really, really hard? I sound like Barbie. Math is hard.
I walked into med school, I didn't know what was happening. I was like, what have I done? What have I done? And everyone's nodding along, and I just knew mitochondria was the powerhouse of the cell. That was it. And I was like, well, I've taken out all these loans. I'm stuck. There's no way I can pay this back without a medical degree. And I just battened down the hatches, and I finished it at the top of my class.
And well, there you go. Give Mary Claire a round of applause for that.
I had good grades. I had really good grades in undergrad.
So during your 8 years of becoming a doctor, you said you received just about 7 hours of menopause education.
1 hour lecture. Any other docs in here? I know there's a few. Yeah. So, 1 hour lecture in med school, and it was and the menopause is the end of your periods, a few hot flashes, and a dry vagina. Carry on. So
did that seem nuts to you? Were you like, WTF, or was it just...
No, I was a good girl. I did everything I was told. I checked every box. I was sitting in the front of the class taking all the notes. And if that's all they told me about menopause, I just assumed that's all I had to know.
So what did that kind of tell you at that experience, and knowing that women's bodies were kind of virtually ignored during medical school? What did that tell you about how the medical establishment viewed women? So
when I was researching really for the new menopause, and started digging into Eleanor Klinghorn's work, and It's All in Her Head by Dr. Komen. I was looking at the historical perspective of this, which they don't teach us, how women's health kind of evolved, and that the uterus they thought used to wander, the wandering womb, and that hysteria was a medical term, real terminology until like a couple of decades ago. And I was like, wait a minute, because in OB-GYN, I learned amazing stuff. Like I was a great surgeon, I was a great obstetrician, I was a decent gynecologist. But then as I was traversing through my own menopause and wondering, what in the hell is going on? Why do I feel like this? Why am I not myself? Why, aches, pains, not sleeping, all the things. I gaslit myself. And that's when the kind of like reckoning of what are we doing here?
And I don't blame you for that, because I was really disgusted to hear that at medical school you were taught to be wary of WWs.
So yeah, that was in residency. So after school, my very first rotation was labor and delivery nights. And that is the most fun as an intern you're ever going to have. And you are running around the unit all night long. You're getting snacks, like they're bringing you chips and like sodas, and then you're like running to catch these babies. And I'm like, how did y'all meet? I'm like getting to know the patients. It's so much fun. And then you get this beautiful baby at the end, and I cry every time still, until I stopped doing obstetrics. And just this beautiful experience. So then my next block is gynecology. Okay, time to get serious. So we would do a couple of days in the OR and like 3 days in clinic. So my first clinic day, long white coat, so proud of it, it's brand new. And this is in the days of paper charts. That's how old I am, almost 57. So they would bring,
so
I'm
old.
Just a baby. So they would bring all the poor patients in first thing in the morning, and they would just wait for their turn. So we had about 70 charts stacked up. And the upper levels would run and grab the surgery cases first, because they need to get their numbers, they're graduating, they need to operate, it's fun for them. Then the next couple of years levels would get the procedures, like the polyps and the biopsies and all the things. That left just whatever else left for the interns. So I grabbed my chart, and I open it up, and it's a woman, and it's her like third or fourth doctor visit for these laundry list of problems. She was in her 40s. Her periods were a little bit irregular. She wasn't sleeping. She'd gained some weight. She was having headaches. She had no libido. She had some aches and pains. She had some dizziness. And I thought, she'd seen family medicine, she had palpitations, she'd seen cardiology, and finally, she's going through the referral system. Well, we don't know what's wrong with you. Go to OB-GYN, maybe it's something to do with that. And so I go to my upper level who's in charge of me that day, and I say, here's Miss Smith, and I present the case. And he goes, did you check her thyroid? I said, family medicine did. I went through the lab. She had some routine labs done. Everything was normal. Physical exam was pretty much normal. And he said, you got a WW. And I blinked and said, okay, what's that? And he said, don't write this in the chart, but that's a whiny woman. And she was Caucasian, so it was actually a WWW, a whiny white woman. And I internalized that story for the rest of my training. And I've talked to other clinicians across the U.S., and there are other names in other parts of the country. It's whiny gynies in California, Madame Dolores, like up in this area, TBD, Total Body Dolor in Miami, and then status Hispanicus. Why everyone is so down on the Latinas, I have no idea. But, there is this systematic lore. Now, this guy wasn't evil. He had been taught this. But there was just something about a woman in her 30s, 40s, maybe early 50s that you couldn't put your finger on. The labs looked okay. She just kind of was complaining a lot about multiple different things, and we were never taught that hormones might be involved in this. And that story bubbled up when I was writing and researching for the new menopause, and it just stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, that happened. And that was institutionalized. Like, that was taught, that I was taught that women tend to somaticize psychological problems. And if you can't figure out what it is, it's all in her head.
That's so disgusting. But anyway, I want to, there could have been more progress being made. You finished your residency in 2002. I'm sure other women who were entering medicine, because now more women are in med schools than men.
Yeah, and definitely more in OB-GYN. It's like 70% are female.
Yeah, which I'm happy about personally. But you finished your residency in 2002. And that was exactly the same time, and I remember this because we covered it on the Today Show. The Women's Health Initiative was stopped prematurely. Can you just take us back? Because I think it really paralyzed advancements in women's health. Can you just kind of explain in simple terms what happened, why, and how the media, pardon my, involvement in this. I think Ann Curry was reporting on that. I'm totally kidding. I'm kidding. It was all of us. How the media, but she was mentioned in the New York Times thing.
It was the number one medical news story of 2002.
So what happened exactly?
Yeah, so the Women's Health Initiative, which we were very excited about, was a study funded by the NIH. It was a $1 billion study. It was the first time we were going to study women's health. And we knew from observational data that women on hormone therapy, now most women were starting hormone therapy at about the age of 50 or 51. There was no talk of treatment of perimenopause. Everyone was like finishing their periods, coming in complaining of hot flashes, let's give her hormone therapy. And we knew that women on HRT, or MHT, however you want to call it, had less heart attacks than women who weren't on it. And they didn't die of their heart attacks, and they got heart disease later in life. So the NIH wanted to find out, is this because women on HRT tend to be healthier and wealthier and have better access? Is this a real finding from being on hormone therapy? Because observational data is correlation, not causation, right? And a randomized control study versus placebo is the gold standard in research to define is this a cause and effect. So yay, we're going to study women. We're going to see if HRT really does prevent heart attacks. So because that was the end result, that's really what they were looking for. They started, the average age of the study was 63 years old, because it takes a woman a while to develop heart disease and have a heart attack, and the longer we run the study, the more expensive it is. So as a cost-cutting measure, we're going to get older patients than we would use. Now, they had patients as old as 79 that started the study. They have two arms. If you have a uterus, you get an estrogen and progesterone. The only formulation they used in the study was Prempro for those patients, which was Premarin plus a synthetic progestin, Provera. Then in the other arm, if you've had a hysterectomy, or the few women who were born without uteruses got just plain the Premarin by themselves. Now, Premarin is from conjugated equine estrogen from pregnant horse urine, and it actually contains several estrogen components, not just estradiol. At the time, that was reasonable. That was the number one formulation. There was nothing unusual about that. And of course, Prempro was very happy to have their drug studied. So off they go collecting data. And they noticed after the first couple of years that the estrogen and progesterone arm was trending towards having more breast cancer diagnoses. Not the estrogen-only arm, just the estrogen combined with progestin arm. And then this is where things get kind of wonky, where politics started playing in, like internal politics in the menopause world and women's health world. Of 5 of the recent, in other words, this was a $1 billion study. There were multiple centers involved in this, but 5 of the key researchers get together and they decide that they're going to write this preliminary paper, stop the study, and state clearly that they believe that estrogen and progesterone together in this particular formulation causes breast cancer. And they let some of the reviewers, there were several, 30, 40, professors on this paper, they weren't really allowed to read it. We weren't allowed to read it, and they call a press conference. When is the last time the NIH called a press conference for anything? And they announced to the world, estrogen causes breast cancer. And it was like a bomb went off. Here's all these women who've been given hormone therapy who are doing great, and now they're told they're going to get breast cancer. So they throw their prescriptions in the trash. It was on the cover of every newspaper. It was reported on every morning show, on the nightly news. We didn't have the internet back then, but it was viral, okay, is how you would define it. I remember I was a chief resident, and, we were giving hormone therapy, not all the time, but it was it was something that we did. She had severe hot flashes. And then we were like, stop. And then over the next 20 years, so much of all of that research has been rescinded, walked back, but none of that got publicized. It's like this gauntlet went down that no one studied menopause anymore. There were no new studies. We're still collecting data from the WHI. We know a lot. It's just a data set. I don't want to demonize a data set, but the way that all went down at that time just scared people to death. And then we have a whole generation of clinicians, me included after that, who never really learned about hormone therapy or how to prescribe it.
So when you were yourself going through menopause, as you mentioned earlier, you realized that, well, first of all, that was terrible, because think of all the research that was lost for decades, right? When everybody said
it was buried.
We're really afraid.
It was a bomb.
And well, I think, well, we can talk about this in a moment, but when you were 48 and you started going through menopause, you realized, I don't really have anyone guiding me, and I don't know how to navigate this period of my life.
I called my nurse practitioner who I had trained and was like, I think I'm going to die if I don't take this. Like, my symptoms were so severe, the sleep was so disrupted, my hot flashes were so bad. And I was like, I can't live like this. And I remember thinking, well, if I get breast cancer, I'm going to die anyway. So, like, I'm going to either kill my husband and be in jail, or I'm going to get breast cancer and just deal with the consequences, And so I reluctantly go on hormone therapy, and like my whole life shifted. Then I realized, my back doesn't hurt anymore. I'm sleeping so much better. I'm, so many other aspects of my life got better. I'm like, okay. Then I go, I got into the nutrition space with Galveston Diet, and I go to my first menopause conference, and I'm sitting in the audience watching Sharon Malone, Avram Blooming, who wrote Estrogen Matters. Anybody read it? It's insane, such a great book. And Carol Tavris, who the co-authors of that book. Watching them break down the WHI and all the mistakes made along the way and all the points that had been rescinded and how safe and effective hormone therapy was. And I sat in the audience with tears running down my eyes in San Diego thinking, why did I not know this? I am the expert, and no one has put this information in front of me. I was a good girl. I checked every box. I did my recertification for CME every year. Never did the American College of OB-GYN put the new information in front of me. Like, they're a little busy delivering babies and, all the things that we have to do in OB-GYN, and I don't think all of women's health after reproduction ends should be laid at the foot of your gynecologist. And so, that was the lightning bolt moment for me of, wait, it's safe? Like, I'm not going to die? I'm not hurting myself? I'm actually helping multiple organ systems here? I had no idea. That was 3.5 years ago.
I can still, though, when we talk about HRT or menopause hormonal therapy, whichever you choose, I still think there is that fear of breast cancer and increasing your risk. So tell us scientifically, what is the truth?
Yeah. So when you look at the numbers, you can stretch and bend and statistics certain ways. There's relative risk and there's absolute risk. So relative risk is like a percentage change in a population. Absolute risk is, what is Mary Claire's risk if I do or don't do this? Like, what is my absolute risk? And the breast cancer cases for absolute risk went from for estrogen and progesterone only. Okay, the estrogen only arm actually had a 30% decreased risk of breast cancer.
Decrease?
Decrease. Estrogen alone. It seemed to be the progestin component. The other thing most people don't realize is the placebo arm in that group had a really low rate of breast cancer compared to the general population. And so when you looked at the contrast of those two numbers, the risk seemed really high. But it went from 4 out of 1,000 women per year to 5 out of 1,000 women per year. That was it. And now, relatively, that's about a 25% increase. But absolute risk, it's tiny.
Tiny. And why do you have, you say it might have been the progesterone, and that's really to protect against other kinds of cancers, like uterine cancer.
When a woman has unopposed estrogen, either iatrogenically, like I give her estrogen prescription without progesterone, she has a uterus, or she doesn't ovulate regularly. Over time, you can develop hyperplasia of the lining of the uterus, and we learned that the hard way when we started giving estrogen in the 50s and 60s without a progestogen. And then Then we learned, okay, if we give her some kind of a progestogen with her estrogen, we can negate that risk and take it down to baseline.
But women who have a family history of breast cancer should not be doing HRT. Am I correct?
No, not at all. So
I'm wrong.
Just having a family history is not at all a contraindication to hormone replacement therapy. And what we're learning now is dose matters, formulation matters, method of delivery matters. So when we're talking about a paper just got published, it looks like for dementia protection, transdermal estrogen is going to be better than your oral formulations. I mean, there's so much nuance here. There's so much great stuff coming out. Unfortunately, not a lot in the U.S. right now as the NIH grants have dried up. But when we look at, there's still great stuff happening in Europe and in Asia and other countries, which is where I get an alert on my phone every day, every time menopause is mentioned.
What if your BRCA, if you have the BRCA gene?
So that's more nuance, right? So if you are high risk because of a genetic disorder, it's not an absolute no, it's a maybe, and we have to really look at staging, especially if you're DCIS. But now that Duavi's on the market,
now that what?
Duave, which is a combination of Premarin plus beta-doxyphene, so it's a SERM, selective estrogen reuptake modulator. Beta-doxyphene, this just got announced. We knew that it binds and blocks the estrogen receptors in the breast and uterus. So we can allow the estrogen to go to the other parts of the body. That'll keep, help your brain and your bones and your vagina, but then it won't activate the endometrium or the breast tissue.
How can I get some of that? No, seriously.
Yeah. So for DCIS, so they were looking specifically at DCIS patients. And it's looking very promising. Ductal carcinoma in situ, so stage 0 cancers.
Uh-huh.
So they're going to... This was the first step of the trial. I think the next step is going further into higher risk patients.
That's why it upsets me that the Women's Health Initiative was stopped and research really was paralyzed, because I think about the last 25 years, how much further along we would be. But it's sort of typical about what you experienced and overall how the medical establishment treats diseases and situations women face versus what men face.
Imagine if women are born with all of their eggs and they last us until they go away at menopause. And so that we're expected to live 30 to 40 years, if we're lucky, without the benefit of our ovaries producing estrogen. If the same thing happened to men and their empty ball sacks flapped in the breeze for 30 years, this would be a national emergency. And their penis shriveled up and they had pain and their joints hurt and they couldn't sleep and they were getting belly fat. I mean, Jesus.
Donald Trump would definitely make an executive order for that. No, it's true. So I think this is really important. So obviously everyone here, if they're in that situation, should talk to their doctor. But I also, I want to talk about perimenopause, because that's what Mary Claire's new book is about, because there's peri-menopause and post. And I think it all kind of blurs together for a lot of us. We don't know, when does perimenopause start? I think we know that menopause is official if you've gone a year without a period, right?
And that is one day in your life. You are now menopause. One day. Now, if it's a year, Katie, what do you do if it's a leap year? Do we wait 366 days? What if you've had a hysterectomy? What if you have a Mirena IUD? What if you never had regular periods? It's such an arbitrary definition, and it just kind of pisses me off that this is, what it signifies is the end of your ovarian lifespan, which ages twice as fast as any other organ in your body. Let's call it what it is. It's ovarian failure. So post-menopause, no more periods, ovaries have shut down, you're done. We're going to live the next 30, 40 years and figuring out what's your best path, okay? Perimenopause. So the reason why we ovulate is not because of the ovaries. They're just kind of stupid and do what they're told, okay? The signals come from the brain. Ovulation starts in the brain. So the hypothalamus, which is a gland that sits in the middle of our heads, has a little finger in the blood and is sensing for estradiol levels. And when those levels naturally decline after ovulation, it says, whoa, where's my estrogen? It likes The brain likes estrogen. So it sends a signal to the pituitary gland called GnRH, if anyone cares. And the pituitary is like, gotcha, boss. And it starts pulsatively sending LH and FSH. So if anybody's been through fertility, you know these words. So those LH, luteinizing hormone, and follicular stimulating hormone bind to the cells around the eggs, and they start producing estradiol and progesterone. And that beautiful EKG-like ebb and flow of hormones happens month after month after month in pre-menopause. Again, by the time you're 30, you're down to about 10% of that egg supply you were born with. And by the time we're 40, we're down to 3%. Perimenopause begins when the signals coming from the brain, you don't have enough eggs left to respond the way that you used to. So your brain gets really upset. You start having brain fog. You start having mental health challenges that you never had before. Exacerbations and anxiety come out of nowhere. And this is well before your periods get irregular. And the brain is like pounding the ovary to try to get those 3 eggs left are holding hands and like, God, you know. And so you're just, and then all of a sudden it's like it just vomits estrogen because you have this massive surge of LH and FSH. So we end up with these crazy high levels of estradiol, sometimes as high as pregnancy. And then progesterone really struggles after that to catch up. So you end up with these prolonged periods of high estrogen and no progesterone, which some of you may have been diagnosed with estrogen dominance. I'm like, that's a whole nother topic. So what used to look like this really pretty EKG ebb and flow every month in a healthy patient in premenopause now becomes what I call the zone of chaos. I take spaghetti and I throw it at the wall, and you have these scribblies, and you just have these wildly fluctuating estrogen and progesterone levels on their way down. It's like a roller coaster.
So what does that mean? I mean, first of all, every person is different, right? So all the
average
symptoms
age
might
of
be
full
different.
menopause is about 51 in the U.S. for Caucasians. Now, Asian women tend to go a tiny bit older. African Americans about 18 months sooner. So Southeast Asians, so like people from the Indian continent, 46 is the average age of menopause.
Wow.
Yeah. So all you girls out there who are like, they told me I was too young. I'm like, come talk to me, please. You're not too young. So then, but we still have a pretty wide variety. The normal curve for menopause is 46 to 55. So we have a really wide variation. Now, perimenopause, that transition is 7 to 10 years. So do the math. 35 to 45 is when you're going to start, something's not right.
And so is that an age where you should start thinking about HRT?
Maybe. So for mental health changes, so this new onset anxiety or worsening anxiety that was well controlled before, or depression, or sometimes even these ADHD signs, great data coming out of Australia. Transdermal estrogen is going to be your new best friend. Help stabilize. We're going to send a signal to the brain. Chill. Everything's cool. We're going to give you a low dose estrogen in perimenopause.
Can you talk about why estrogen is such a wonder drug? I miss my estrogen so much. You know, my husband misses my estrogen too. Good Lord. But it also, you know, it's such a wonder hormone because
it really is.
It's great for your skin. It also is actually a mood elevator. Estrogen is. So when it starts to plummet, no wonder a lot of women feel depressed, right?
So another like study that like lightning bolt stopped me in my tracks was looking at the mapped locations of the G-coupled estrogen receptors in the body, and they're everywhere. They're in our brains, our bones, our endothelium. You know, that's why our liver, that's why our cholesterol go. Whose cholesterol shot up in perimenopause and menopause with no changes in diet and exercise? Yeah, me. And, you know, it's just about everywhere. It lubricates our joints. That's why we get frozen shoulder when the levels begin to decline. It's in the sinoatrial node. That's why the palpitations happen in 43% of us. So I just did, for perimenopause, I did a symptom, I had 800 people respond. And 86.5% of patients, hot flashes. So that was number one for my subset. But then, you know, still in the 80s, fatigue, joint pain, vaginal pain, you know, weight gain. Number two was weight redistribution.
Yeah, what do we do about that, man?
So when the estrogen levels go down, our inflammatory markers go up, our insulin resistance goes up, our cholesterol goes up, and we start, because we lose that protection of the anti-inflammatory benefits of estrogen, we start shunting new fat deposits where you never had them before, usually to the intra-abdominal cavity. So menopause hormone therapy does attenuate this. Nutrition is very important, the quality of your nutrition. Now, if you starve yourself, you will lose visceral fat, but that's not why we're here. We don't need smaller bodies. We need big, juicy muscles and bones. And trying to fight your way into a smaller frame is undercutting your ability to live in your 70s and 80s well.
That's so interesting.
I've seen you work out.
Yeah. Well, I want to get. We have about 10 minutes, and I'm going to do kind of a lightning round because we got a lot of questions from a lot of people, Mary Claire, and I want to be responsive to them. Okay, here we go. If you've already gone through menopause and are 60, is it too late for HRT?
Not necessarily. So that came from in the Women's Health Initiative when they looked at the data and de-aggregated it by age. And they saw that women who were younger, starting at about age 50, or within the first 10 years of menopause and before the age of 60, did have significant cardiovascular benefit. They did have less heart attacks. They did die less from their heart attacks. So estrogen, as it turns out, is better at prevention than cure. Now, does it mean someone over 60 is not a candidate? Absolutely not. If she has risk factors, I'll get a calcium cardiac score. Mm-hmm. We'll counsel around that, but it will always protect your bones.
But it'll also reduce your risk of heart attack, right? Or not?
Yeah, if you don't have pre-existing cardiovascular disease, you will benefit more than likely.
But it can't reverse,
It will not reverse.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Can you stay on it forever?
I might.
Yeah. Do you plan to stay on it?
And if I develop a contraindication, if I have a tumor that's being fed by estrogen, if I have severe liver disease, then I will make the decision to stay or go. But for now, my life is much better. My quality of life, my cardiovascular health, my cholesterol, my vagina.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
But I think we need to talk about that because it's a problem. What can you do
here?
What can you do to protect your health if you cannot take HRTs?
So if you're not a candidate for hormone therapy, okay, that's okay. And if you choose not to take it, that's okay. I just want you to make this decision based on fact and not fear. So you have to double down on the other pillars of health. HRT is a tool. It's an important tool in many of our toolkits, but it's not the only tool. Just going on HRT, I feel like I would fail a woman if I just slapped an estrogen patch on her and kicked her out the door without talking to her about protein, about exercise, about stress reduction, about putting your own oxygen mask on first, about sleep prioritization. Because those are the keys to longevity. Estrogen can help. You're going to live a couple years longer if you take it, but if you don't really look at your diet, really look at how you're moving your body, really look at how you're protecting your bones and your brain, it's likely to be of little longevity benefit.
Okay, we're going to talk about protein in a moment. Someone said, after a year of not having my menstrual cycle and experiencing some hot flashes, my cycle came back to haunt me. Could stress or medications cause that to happen?
We have a few, periods that get resurrected after that year. But when we have postmenopausal bleeding, which is bleeding after that 1 year mark, it's important that you see your gynecologist and get an evaluation.
I just did an interview about endometrial cancer, which I didn't know about, and it is really about bleeding and spotting, and if it's after your menopause, you really do need to see a doctor.
You really need to go and get evaluated.
Right, okay. If you're in perimenopause and still trying to get pregnant, is it okay to use HRT? Lots of my friends are wondering about this.
Yes. So I just, for the new perimenopause, I interviewed Natalie Crawford, who's a wonderful reproductive endocrinologist, fertility specialist. She's in Texas. And we had a long talk about this. And so she does, if they're very symptomatic, menopause hormone therapy dosing does not suppress ovulation, so that you can still get pregnant. So I'm always counseling patients when they're in perimenopause, do you want to be pregnant? Because what I'm giving you the doses available in menopause hormone therapy will not guarantee that you're not going to ovulate. And so, do you need contraception? Then we're going to talk about contraceptive hormone therapy in
But
place.
you can get pregnant on HRT, I
Yeah.
think is what this person wanted to know.
You can.
Someone says, I'm 45 with 2 elementary age kids. When do you emerge from the haze?
I'll let you know. I was that age with 2. They're 21 and 24 now. So, there's if you have your babies later in life, there's kind of this weird segue that a lot of these patients in their 40s are going right into perimenopause. And it's really hard when you're nursing and you're late hours and staying up with kids. Like, we're struggling as a species, as women, that we are not able to tell the difference between what is life
Right.
and stress and
that
all
was
the
your
things,
case
'cause-
too.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's hard. You can make all these excuses up for, like, if you're feeling depressed or something is going on with your body, and it is hard to separate your life experiences. And you had that because you were depressed because you lost a second brother. Mary Claire has lost 3 of her brothers prematurely. But you didn't know whether what you were experiencing was physiological
Right.
or emotional. And I think a lot of women have that trouble, right?
It took me about 6 months of being sad and grieving, and then going, wait, when was my last period? And I was gaining weight, and I just attributed everything to grief, and certainly it was part of it. But then as I felt the grief bubble kind of lift, and then I was still having all these symptoms, I was like, wait a minute. When was my last period? Like, I'm the gynecologist. Like, I'm the expert, and I could not diagnose my own menopause for 6 months.
Somebody asked, what are your thoughts on using estrogen cream on your face? I want to know the answer to this.
It's very safe. There's pretty good data. They've done more studies recently. So the studies were done in the 90s, and then everything got shut down when the Women's Health Initiative dropped the bomb on women's health. That disaster, but then others have picked it up. And so topical, you can take your vaginal estrogen cream, mix it in with some moisturizer, just, a pea-sized amount, and put it on your face. Now, mine is formulated. I go through a compounder to do it, and I use topical estriol on my face every day.
Okay.
Because we lose 30% of our collagen. I don't have to tell a woman this, she knows, in the first 5 years of menopause. And so this will attenuate that and give back some of the elasticity as well.
Will that help my crepey skin?
Maybe, but the CO2 laser is really good too for that.
Yeah, but I get ads. I know I'm 68. You should see the ads I'm fed. They're so pathetic and depressing. Like, they're all about belly fat. They're all about wrinkles. They're all about neck wrinkles. They're all about this, that, and the other thing. They're all about cream for crepey skin. And my friend Pat, who's in the green room, actually accidentally bought like a year's supply, and she was getting it every month, and she's like, this shit does nothing. So what's the deal with those?
Buyer beware. My ads are balance your hormones, get your sexy back. I took this for 1 month and I've dropped 35 pounds. My husband, I can't get enough of him. My husband would be very excited if that was me. But, that's the ads I'm being served at 57.
Yeah.
And, buyer beware. There is no supplement out there that is going to resuscitate the life of your ovaries. It's not happening. So, and when you see people, I get served a lot, but who are trying to demonize hormone therapy, no, you need to buy my course. No, you need to buy my supplements. No, it's not really estrogen. It's your adrenal fatigue or cortisol or whatever. I'm like, listen, I don't need to check a cortisol level to believe a woman is stressed. I just talk to her. I've just saved you $500 right there.
Well, you are a great doctor, and I think a lot of people said, how do we find a doctor with Dr. Haver's understanding? It's so hard to get doctors to really listen. Another said, I'm definitely in perimenopause, but my doctor won't help me. Mm-hmm. My OB says that I'm too young for any hormone replacement
too young,
therapy.
Too old.
So I mean,
your ovaries don't have a clock.
I think this is a real problem, though. Like, how do you find doctors who have the very latest in the science about these issues, but also won't think of you as a WW?
It's hard, right? Because we've all grown up in a medical system that has really, medicine was built by men for men, and really for Caucasian men. And we're just scraping by. And it turns out we're not little men with breasts and uteruses. I am tired of bikini medicine. And we disease differently, we die differently, we age differently. We are owed centuries of research. So how do we find someone who might be helpful? You can't really walk into your OB-GYN's office who did great care, who delivered your babies, who was absolutely amazing, that was me, and expect for them to have had the time or the inclination. Anyone doing menopause care now, stepped outside of the box of training. Mm-hmm. So the Menopause Society, menopause.org, has a list of certified providers on their website. There's not very many of us, but there's a place to start. On our website at The Pause Life, my wonderful followers have written testimonials, and we've gathered them up across the world by city and state and country. That's another option. There's some great telemedicine options, and they don't pay me to say this, they were female-founded companies who saw a need and built a company to serve us specifically. And so there's MIDI, Alloy, Evernow. Those are my top 3. There's some others coming up in the market. It's getting very hot. There's some I wouldn't recommend, but I won't say their names out loud. You can come see me later in public. And so I think that's a really good stopgap for now. But, the data is clear. Only 8% of residents coming out in primary care felt comfortable even talking to a woman about menopause.
Do you feel like that's
last year?
Do you feel like that's changing now? I mean, obviously it's going to take a period of time to make the transition, but do you think because of doctors like you and other experts who are really zeroing in on this, that the number of experts will really expand? So
here's really good news. I've been working with Jen Weiss-Wolf. Where is she, Jennifer? On the Citizens Guide to Menopause Advocacy. And the federal government has taken a step back from this right now, but the states are really stepping up, and red and blue states. So this is a bipartisan effort. We have 26 bills in 16 different states that are either voting for legislation that's going to get menopause care covered, mandating training requirements. Louisiana is one, that's where I'm from. Typically is more conservative. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't expect, but they actually have a state law that requires menopause coverage for menopause care.
Mike Johnson is from Louisiana.
Yeah. So we're getting there. So the states, so am I. The states are really starting to step up. So Jennifer and I compiled the Citizens Guide, so you can go to each state to see what the legislation is, and it's really getting a groundswell.
Okay, we're almost out of time. Can I just throw out a couple quick questions? Okay, what is the deal on protein? Seriously.
You need more of it.
But, I mean, do you need to eat your weight in protein?
I think that's a little bit excessive. So here we have the FDA requirements, which are 0.8 grams, as the other physician was saying. And, that's just to keep you out of kwashiorkor. That's to keep you out of massive protein malnutrition. As we age, and if we're trying to build muscle, and you should be trying to build and hang on to your muscle so that you don't end up in a nursing home from frailty, okay? We need more than that.
So what percentage of your body weight should you be eating?
So you look at it in, I'm leaning patients somewhere in the 1.3 to 1.8, depending on, I measure their muscle mass. I have a machine in my office.
What does that mean, 1.3 to 1.8?
Grams for every kilogram. So it's like
Jesus,
divide by 2.2.
I can't figure that out. Can you just give me like a percentage?
So less than 1.
I'm bad at math.
Yeah, less than 1. So most women, somewhere between 80 to 120 grams.
So let's say you weigh 125 on a good day. So how much protein should you be eating?
Well, it depends on how much of that weight is muscle.
I don't know. So how do you figure this out? Do you have to go to a doctor and get your...
DEXA-scan can tell you your body composition, but I have an in-body scanner, like I have the medical grade one, but you can buy the home scales. They're not cheap, but it is a way to give you a clue as to how much of this poundage is just water weight, how much is muscle, how much is visceral fat, how much is subcutaneous fat.
So talk to a doctor, in other words.
Who knows what they're doing.
Okay. All right. What about protein powders? Because now I hear there's all sorts of bad stuff in them.
Just like anything that you can buy, and this is from a doctor who sells supplements and is coming out with a protein powder. Read the labels, know what's in there. Are you looking for something that is whey-based? Are you looking for something that is pea protein? Vegan, vegetarian, we have lots of options.
It's so confusing.
Lots of extra ingredients in some of these products as fillers for flavor. And so, as we're going through the flavor profiles, you have to make it taste good, but you don't want to add too much crap in it. So it is a bit of an art and a science together.
What about creatine? Okay, everyone's talking about creatine
Yeah.
now. This is so hard to
this is
keep
what
up with.
Abby Smith-Ryan is an incredible PhD, exercise physiologist, who is doing the work on creatine and menopausal women. And it is synergistic with working out. Don't take creatine and think you're going to grow bone. But if you're doing the resistance training, creatine appears to be synergistic with your protein intake.
What is creatine?
So it's a good question. So creatine is a form of an amino acid, a chain, specific chain that we store in higher amounts when we're younger. And our stores drop off with aging and then with menopause as well. And so people who are supplementing, it used to be for bodybuilders or build muscle. Well, when you look at the menopausal women who were doing the resistance training, eating plenty of protein and taking creatine, their gains were higher in strength and in the volume of their muscle. And so that is always a positive effect. There's no amount of muscle that is too much.
What about collagen?
So yeah, I'm a fan. So you have to ask, why are you taking the collagen? What would the benefits be? So collagen is a form of protein, but it's not complete, meaning it doesn't have all of the amino acids that we need as humans. Okay, so if you eat meat, you'll have all of the amino acids. It's a complete protein. So collagen is one of the incomplete proteins, but it contains most of them. And there's specific studies. So when I was digging around, how can I help my patients prevent osteoporosis, I found studies that were done on this specific Verisol collagen. Verisol was for skin. It was Fortibone for the bone. And they saw improvements in their osteoporosis, osteopenia, and osteoporosis. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take this. This would work for the ladies who are in the nursing homes who already have the disease. I bet it's not going to hurt me, and it's going to help me prevent, because I'm all about prevention. I am not interested in osteoporotic fracture like my mother and my grandmother had.
Right.
Or dementia. So, I'm refusing to accept that as inevitable.
My joints are so sore. Sometimes when I sit for a long time, then I wake up, I get up, and I walk around the apartment like this. It's so bad, hello? What can I do about that? Will collagen help? What about glucosamine chondroitin stuff?
So that's been more studied for joint pain, glucosamine chondroitin.
Does that work?
There's pretty good studies showing improvement in joint pain.
Can you come up with something really good for my joints? Because I'm so creaky.
I'll talk to my husband's running the back end of that business for us, so I'll talk to him.
Okay, before we go, you've been so nice and generous with your time, Mary Claire. What do you do to stay looking like this and to feeling like this? Just give us a quick roundup.
Well, I wake up at 5 and I get on the internet and I start talking to my phone in my pajamas with a cup of coffee. Actually, I get so much, when you talk to women all day long, when you read their stories, when you realize, it's really motivating to do the things. But really, I've lost 3 brothers, 2 to cancer, 1 to liver failure from HIV and hepatitis. I realize I may not have as much time as I expect to. And I don't have great genes. I've lost multiple cousins to cancer. That is very motivating to me. The women who do survive, who run the cancer gauntlet and make it, don't live well that last decade. They are plagued with loss of independence, either through dementia and or through loss of muscle mass, loss of bone mass, and fracture. So both my mother and my grandmother had dementia. My mother's still alive. She's in a memory care facility, fell in January and broke her hip. She's never walked again. And my siblings and I are constantly in discussion on what to do with mom, how do we taking shifts and doing all the things. And my husband's going through the same thing with his mom. Different, but and one of my daughters is here, I don't want to do that to you, baby. I know you'll take care of me, but I want you to live your life. I don't want you to worry about mom. And that's what my patients are coming in. They're like, put out the fire of menopause. Now let's talk turkey. I'm like, if your mom's 95 and kicking ass and climbing mountains and baby, she's slowing down a little, but you're not, part of your day is not the mental math of figuring out how to take care of her for 10 years. That's what my patients want. And that starts right now. I don't care how old you are. That starts now. bigger bodies, better bones, better muscles, a better brain.
I think we're going to try to put together a lot of information because it's so much to absorb, and sometimes I have a hard time like following because I'm basically pretty lazy, and I want some guidelines like what should I be doing. So hopefully we're going to publish something for you all where all this information is in one place so you can follow it. And I can't let you go without asking you, since we're at City Winery, what is the deal with alcohol?
Oh God. I for 90% of my patients, I'm not sleeping tonight. If we choose to drink at night, we're not sleeping.
Well, then we maybe shouldn't do that, right?
So I have to be.
You
really
told me
careful.
day drinking was better.
Yeah, if you like get it out of your
That
system
sounds
6
like
hours
terrible
before you go
advice
to
for
bed.
a doctor.
Actually, what is Kristen's last name with Whoop? She's the one who gave me that line. That if you can get it out of your system 6 hours before you go to bed, then you tend to have much better sleep. And I'm on the scientific advisory committee for Oura Ring. And we're doing a deep dive into sleep. And not just like, are you sleeping, are you not sleeping? Sleep architecture. How long are you sleeping in each phase? And how alcohol affects that, how menopause affects that, how hormone therapy affects that.
Well, Mary Claire, wait, what are you saying? We can drink wine or not?
Just pick and choose your occasions.
Yeah,
and expect to not have a great night's sleep.
Drink moderately. What about tequila? No, they say it doesn't have that much sugar in it, and that's what I've been drinking lately.
It has less sugar. We're not sure if it's that different from wine on the effect on sleep. It's probably the alcohol.
Will you keep us posted
I
on
will,
all this
absolutely.
research, please? Ladies and gentlemen, Mary Claire Haver.